They'll think I'm weak, Astrid, a cripple. Einar avoided his wife's eyes, focusing on the frayed fishing net in his lap. He tugged a loose strand, the rough twine scratching against his callous fingers. Outside their small cottage, the wind howled, a constant reminder of the storm that had ravaged Alessand. Einar, stop that! Astrid placed a steaming mug on the table beside him. It's not your fault the storm took the boat. But it is. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling a few ceramic dishes on a shelf. A real fisherman would have written it out. My father. Your father is gone, Astrid interrupted, her voice soft but firm. He wouldn't want you to risk your life. He scoffed, picking at the frayed edge of the net again. The sudden rapping at the door interrupted them. Lars, his face weathered like driftwood, stepped inside. Astrid, my dear. Lars nodded a greeting. He turned to Einar. Heard about your boat, lad. A terrible loss. Einar mumbled a response, his gaze still fixed on the net. The sea is a cruel mistress, Lars continued, his eyes twinkling. Takes what she wants, no matter how strong a man you are. He paused, his gaze lingering on Einar. Or how brave. Einar shifted uncomfortably. Later that day, Einar sat alone in the wreckage of his fishing shack, the salty air stinging his eyes. He picked up a framed photograph of his father, a younger, stronger man, holding a hefty cod. He clutched the frame, his knuckles white. The storm raged around him, mirroring the tempest in his soul. He thought of the other fishermen, the ones who'd called him a cripple, their taunts echoing in his ears. He thought of Astrid, her worried eyes, her pleas for him to give up the sea. Shame burned in his throat. He stumbled out into the storm, the wind whipping his hair across his face. He saw it then, a flash of orange in the churning waves. Another boat, capsized. He saw a man, clinging to the hull, his face contorted in terror. He knew he should help, but fear paralyzed him. The waves crashed against the shore, each one a deafening roar. He hesitated. The man's grip loosened. He slipped beneath the waves. Einar watched, frozen, the screams of the wind drowning out the silent scream in his own heart. He returned home, soaked to the bone, shivering. Astrid rushed to him, her face etched with concern. Einar, what happened? Are you hurt? He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I tried, Astrid. I tried to save him, but the waves were too strong. Astrid held him tighter, her silence a comfort and a condemnation. The next morning, a journalist from the city arrived, her notepad in hand, her eyes bright with anticipation. She'd heard whispers of a heroic rescue attempt. Mr. Halvorsen, she began, her voice eager. Tell me about the storm. Tell me about the man you saved. Einar hesitated, the lie forming on his lips before he could stop it. It was like nothing I ever seen. The waves, mountains high, but I saw him clinging to the wreckage. I knew I had to try. And you succeeded? The journalist prompted, her pen poised. Yes, Einar said, his voice gaining strength. He felt a strange thrill, a sense of power he'd never known before. I pulled him aboard. He was near frozen but alive. The journalist scribbled furiously, her eyes gleaming. Einar continued, embellishing his story, adding details, creating a narrative of bravery and selflessness. News of Einar's heroism spread through Asund like wildfire. He became a local celebrity, the crippled fisherman who'd braved the storm to save a life. He basked in the attention, the praise, the newfound respect. But beneath the surface, guilt gnawed at him. He saw the drowned man's face in his dreams, heard his gurgling cries in the wind. Lars visited again, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of pride and concern. You're a hero, Einar, he said, his voice low. But remember, true courage isn't about what you say, it's about what you do. Einar nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew Lars's words held a deeper meaning, a warning he couldn't ignore. The village council organized a ceremony to honor Einar's bravery art. The townspeople gathered, their faces alight with admiration. Astrid stood beside him, her hand clasped tightly in his. He felt a surge of pride, a sense of vindication. He was finally the man his father would have been proud of. Then he saw Tor, his rival, standing at the edge of the crowd, his eyes burning with an intensity that chilled Einar to the bone. Tor pushed his way through the crowd, his face grim. He stopped before Einar, his voice low and menacing. Liar, he spat. You didn't save anyone. I saw you. You watched him drown. The silence hung heavy, broken only by the wind whistling through the gaps in the village hall's wooden walls. Astrid gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The crowd murmured, their admiration turning to suspicion. You're lying. Einar's voice shook, but he met Tor's gaze. I saved him? Tor laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Who'll believe a cripple like you? You were too scared to even get close to the water. Einar lunged at Tor, fists clenched. Lars stepped between them, holding them apart. Enough! This isn't the time or place. He's a liar! Tor yelled, struggling against Lars' grip. He let that man die. Tor, Lars said, his voice low and warning. You have no proof. Tor's face twisted in anger. I saw him. I saw fear in his eyes. He turned to the crowd. He's a fraud, a coward. The crowd parted, their faces now masks of doubt and confusion. Einar felt Astrid's hand slip from his. He looked at her, pleading with his eyes, but she turned away, her face pale. I can explain. Einar stammered, but the words caught in his throat. The lie, once a shield, now felt like a cage. He looked at Lars, his face etched with despair. Lars sighed, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and disappointment. He turned to the crowd. Let us not judge too quickly. The sea is a cruel mistress. Fear can grip even the bravest of hearts. He looked back at Einar, his gaze searching. Einar, is there any truth in what Tor says? Einar opened his mouth to speak, the lie poised on his tongue. He looked at Astrid, at the townspeople, at Tor's accusing eyes. He swallowed, the lie turning to ash in his mouth. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath and said, He's right, I didn't save him, I watched him drown. The hall fell silent. The only sound was the wind, now a mournful dirge. Einar felt a wave of shame wash over him, but also a strange sense of relief. The lie was gone. The truth, painful as it was finally out. Astrid turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise. She didn't speak, but her hand found his, her grip firm and unwavering. I was afraid, Einar continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I lost my boat, my father. I felt like I had nothing left to lose. But seeing that man, seeing him disappear beneath the waves, it broke something inside me. He looked at Lars, his voice gaining strength. You were right, Lars. True courage isn't about what you say, it's about what you do. He turned to the crowd, his gaze steady. I'm not a hero, I'm a coward. But I won't be a coward anymore. He turned and walked out of the hall, Astrid by his side. The crowd parted, their murmurs following him, no longer whispers of admiration, but of something else. Something that felt like respect. The next morning, Einar woke early. He went to the docks, the familiar smell of salt and fish filling his lungs. He saw Tor mending his nets, his face grim. Einar approached him, his heart pounding in his chest. Tor, he said, his voice low. I owe you an apology, and I owe that man's family an apology. Tor looked up, his eyes narrowed. He didn't speak. I'm going to help them, Einar continued. I'm going to help them find his body, and I'm going to help them rebuild their boat. Tor finally spoke, his voice gruff. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. Einar met Tor's gaze, his own steady. And because I need to prove to myself and to everyone else that I can be a better man. Tor grunted, then nodded slowly. He picked up a coil of rope. The tide's going out. Let's get started. Einar worked alongside Tor for days, searching the coastline, dredging the shallows. The townspeople, initially wary, joined in, their skepticism replaced by a grudging respect. Astrid brought them food and water, her silent support a constant source of strength. They didn't find the body, but they found something else. They found a sense of community, a shared purpose. They found forgiveness. Weeks later, a new boat was launched. It wasn't as grand as Einar's father's boat, but it was sturdy and seaworthy. The drowned man's family stood on the dock, their faces itched with grief, but also with gratitude. Einar stood beside them, his hand on the boat's hull. He wasn't a hero. He hadn't saved anyone, but he had faced his fear. He had confessed his lie. He had done what he could to make amends. And in doing so, he had found a different kind of courage. A courage that wasn't about grand gestures or public acclaim, but about quiet acts of atonement and the slow, difficult work of rebuilding trust. He looked out at the sea, the waves now gentle, the wind a soft caress. He knew the sea would always be a force to be reckoned with, but he also knew that he could face it, not with the reckless bravado of a young man, but with the quiet strength of a man who had faced his own demons and emerged, not unscathed, but whole. He looked at Astrid, her hand finding his. He squeezed her hand, a silent promise. He wouldn't be defined by his fear or by his lie. He would be defined by the man he chose to become. Lars stood nearby watching them. He smiled, a rare and genuine smile. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of Einar's journey, of the long, arduous path from cowardice to redemption. The sea, he knew, had taken much from Einar, but it had also given him something in return. It had given him the chance to find his true strength, not in the stories he told, but in the man he had become. Einar turned to Lars and offered a small, tentative smile in return. The ceremony had been a disaster, a public humiliation, but the aftermath had brought a different kind of clarity. The shame still lingered, a dull ache in his chest, but it was now tempered with a newfound resolve. The lie had been a desperate attempt to cling to the image of the strong fisherman his father had been, a way to deflect the whispers and doubts that plagued him. But the truth, once spoken, had a liberating power. He was no hero, but he wasn't a lost cause either. He helped the drowned man's family rebuild their fishing boat, working side by side with Tor, his former rival. The labor was hard, the days long, but the shared purpose forged a bond between them, a silent understanding that transcended their past animosity. He spent hours talking with Astrid, confessing the depths of his fear and insecurity. Her unwavering support, her belief in him even when he didn't believe in himself, became his anchor. He learned to fish again, not with the reckless abandon of his youth, but with a newfound respect for the sea and its unpredictable nature. He no longer sought the thrill of the chase, the glory of a big catch. He fished to provide, to contribute, to be a part of the community that had once shunned him. One evening, months later, Einar sat on the docks, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The sea was calm, the air still. Lars joined him, settling down beside him with a sigh. "The sea," Lars said, his voice soft, "can be a cruel mistress, but she can also be a teacher." Einar nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He had learned a hard lesson, a lesson about courage and honesty, about the weight of lies and the power of redemption. He had learned that true strength wasn't about conquering the sea, but about conquering oneself. He looked at Lars, a genuine smile finally gracing his lips. "I think," he said, his voice filled with a quiet confidence, "I'm finally starting to understand." Lars clapped him on the shoulder, a silent affirmation. The sea stretched out before them, vast and unknowable, a constant reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. But Einar no longer felt the fear that had once paralyzed him. He felt a sense of peace, a sense of purpose. He found his place, not as a hero, but as a man. And that, he realized, was more than enough. The whispers had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of respect. He was Einar, the fisherman, flawed and vulnerable, but also resilient and true. And in the quiet of the evening, as the stars began to appear, he knew that he was finally, truly free.